Each year for Patriots Day, I always speak last. And I sit there with all these great addresses before me, and I get nervous. I really do. Uh, Everyone who has spoke so far has done just a fabulous job. And so we're on. Certain dates in American history are indisputable. April 19th, 1775, the Battle of Lexington and Concord took place outside Boston. July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was issued. And on August 6th, 1777, the pivotal Battle of Oriskany took place. And between September 19th and October 17th of 1777, the Saratoga Campaign played out in Hubbardtown, Bennington, Vermont, and then in Schuylerville. On October 19th, 1781, the Battle of Yorktown took place, and on October 19th, Brigadier General George Cornwallis's troops surrendered to American forces, and in principle, the fighting in the Revolutionary War ceased at that point. What's not so clear is what are the interconnections between these different dates and events. And we're going to try to establish some plausible cause and effect here. And of course, I'm going to go out on the limb a bit to blow the horn of the local guys, particularly from the Tryon County Militia, and as I move forward. The central premise is that although the events were at different locations, and they may have only been connected indirectly, there is a connection between the Battle of Oriskany, the Battle of Saratoga, the French and American alliance that followed, and on to the Battle of Yorktown, and thus directly from General Nicholas Herkimer, who led American forces into those twin ravines to be ambushed at the Battle of Oriskany, and on to Benjamin Franklin. Why Benjamin Franklin? Because he was the chief American diplomat who negotiated with the French and brought them into our side in the Revolutionary War. A little while after, in March of 1776, after Lexington and Concord and the Battle of Bunker Hill, more correctly known as Breach Hill, the British evacuated Boston. Where did they go? They went to New York City and they went to Montreal. And those two locations proved pivotal in what turns out to be the real turning point of the Revolutionary War. Because it was that winter, the winter of 1777, back in London, when the British hatched their plan for the three-prong offensive. And the goal of the three-prong offensive was to separate New England from the rest of the colonies by taking over New York's waterways, the Mohawk River, the Hudson, and Lake Champlain. And to that end, now remember, British forces are in Montreal and New York City. So, Burgoyne leaves from Montreal. He proceeds down through the Champlain Valley. Takes Fort Ticonderoga on the way, and also leaving from Montreal was Major Barry St. Ledger, British major, who proceeded up the St. Lawrence, through Lake Ontario, and eastward through the Mohawk Valley. What does he run into? Fort Stanwix. And he did not want to leave a garrisoned American fort in his wake, and so they laid siege to Fort Stanwix. And it went on and on. And who marched to their rescue? General Nicholas Herkimer and the Tryon County Militia. And as they marched westward towards Oriskany, of course, they were ambushed. The Fort Stanwix siege led inevitably to the Battle of Oriskany. And we all know that in those twin ravines at Oriskany on August 6, 1777, horrific battle took place. It ended in a bloody stalemate, basically, by a horrendous thunderstorm, and Herkimer's forces retreated eastward. They thought they had gotten their butts kicked, and they thought all the way home that they were going to be pursued by advancing British forces. However, and also to point out, at the Battle of Oriskany, who was our first military ally of the United States? The Oneida Indians. And the Revolutionary War split the Iroquois Confederacy asunder. In fact, on the other side in that same battle, the Mohawks and Senecas fought with the British. Three tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy, two on one side, one on the other. The Mohawks and Senecas lost so many chiefs at the Battle of Oriskany that they said, enough's enough. And so they had been the eyes and ears of Mary St. Leger, and so St. Leger was left guideless to make his way through the Mohawk Valley, so he gave up and proceeded back to Montreal. So it was at Oriskany that the British three-prong offensive first began to wobble. Okay? And one leg of the prong was lost, of the three-prong attack was lost. Oriskany, I'm going to say, led not quite directly, but was very instrumental in the outcome later, the defeat of Burgoyne's forces at Saratoga. Now, General Howe was supposed to have moved up the Hudson to meet with Burgoyne and St. Leger in Albany, and he decided to instead go towards Philadelphia and to go after our nation's capital. And also, General Henry Clinton refused to bring British forces up the Hudson to meet with Burgoyne also. So Burgoyne only gets as far as Saratoga, Schuylerville, and is the only leg left. And so we have to ask ourselves, what was the impact of Oriskany on the Battle of Saratoga? Because we know that once the St. Leger threat was relieved in the Mohawk Valley, all those Mohawk Valley farmers were no longer required to defend their properties. And so guess where they all headed? Further eastward to join the forces of Gates at Saratoga against Burgoyne. So Burgoyne, the first day of the Battle of Saratoga occurs at really Hubbardtown and later at Bennington. And I missed one point here. So in summary, not in conclusion, only in summary this far, the forces at Saratoga were impacted in two ways. First of all, American forces were increased because all those Tryon County militia guys did not have to stay home to defend their farms against St. Leger. They went to Saratoga. British forces were lessened. Remember, St. Leger never got there, Howe never got there, Clinton never got there. It was only Burgoyne. And so the two-day battle at Saratoga takes place, and we know that American forces prevailed, which leads us to Benjamin Franklin and what happened after Saratoga. The French and Indian War had left a real bitter taste in French mouths, and they sought revenge. And the Revolutionary War was sweet revenge for the French, who had an axe to grind with the British. Following the French and Indian War, they had to give up all their North American possessions. And Oriskany helped to sharpen that axe. The critical question, would Burgoyne have prevailed at Saratoga if local American forces had not stopped St. Leger in the bloody ravines at Oriskany on that sweltering day in 1777? It's impossible to answer. What we do know is that some of our ancestors fought at both Oriskany and Saratoga, and that after Saratoga, Benjamin Franklin was successful at bringing the French into the Revolutionary War on our side. I had two distant ancestors who fought at the Battle of Oriskany, and that's who my mother traced our DAR pedigree to. And they're buried at Fort Herkimer Church. It's impossible to answer that, of course, but we do know the French come into the war, and when the British finally surrendered at Yorktown in 1781, the 40,000 troops that had Cornwallis bottled up on Yorktown Peninsula, a huge number of those troops were French troops. And plus it was the French Navy that had the British boxed in by sea. So it was the Americans and the French who forced the British to finally capitulate and end the Revolutionary War. Now, in my admittedly biased mind's eye, I see and we see Herkimer and the local boys help save the day at the momentous Battle of Oriskany, which led to the French-American Alliance and directly to Saratoga and Yorktown and American independence. As I said, I was going to go out on a limb and blow the horn for the local boys, and that's our story, and we're going to stick to it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. As I said, I had two distant ancestors who fought at Oriskany. I would say there is a cemetery. This cemetery has such atmospheric history. It's like going to Gettysburg or something for me. There is a similar place north of Little Falls, just a couple miles out of town, just off Route 170, and it's called Yellow Church Cemetery, like Yellow Church Road Cemetery. I would urge you to go there. There are at least 50 Revolutionary War veterans buried there. Many survivors of Oriskany and probably Saratoga. Okay, now to get ready, I'm a history nut, obviously. To get ready for Patriots Day each year, my wife Pat and I always go to some historic sites just to get in the Patriots Day frame of mind. And this year we went to the Saratoga Battlefield, to Victory Woods, and also to Surrender Point. And that's a brand new historic site. It's extremely nice, monument and such, dioramas, and it's where the British actually surrendered to Gates's forces after the Battle of Saratoga. I urge you to go there. Okay, that's the end of my address. Does anybody have any questions for any of us before we get on to closing remarks? Yes, ma'am. My relatives, Zollers and Spoons, S-P-O-H-N. And that's who my mom traced our ancestry through for the DAR. And of course, Pat Stock is the estrogen, am I pronouncing it wrong? Okay. Chapter of the DAR, and she has brought a wreath today that we're going to put upon her grave. All right, closing remarks. I have two things to say. One's a little bit emotional. As far as I'm concerned, today's ceremony is really dedicated to Janet Burke. How many people knew Janet Burke? Raise your hand if you knew her. Remarkable person. And you guys can tell the story of what she did around here. Sandy, say something about Janet, her public service, whatever.
She was just an amazing lady. She was president of our History Center, and she did everything. She put together programs. She did books and booklets and
newsletter.
Yeah, you name it, she did it.
She taught me a lot.
Sorry to put you on the spot. This was extemporaneous. Anybody else say something about Janet?
She taught me a lot.
Yes, go ahead.
She taught me how to do the minutes, and she was a great help. She was a great person.
So she and I have known each other. We taught together at Clinton High School for 20-some years. So I'm going to tell a little different a different part of Janet's past. She was an extraordinary teacher at Clinton High School. Highly respected by everybody, by students, faculty, staff, administration. Janet Burke was pretty much the benchmark at Clinton Central School. And she was a good friend of mine. And we started planning this 3 years ago. And unfortunately, she passed away almost 2 years ago. And Bob Bird is going to be part of this ceremony in a few minutes. So I had to say something about Janet. Now also, my wife, several of us have touched upon this. We've referred to this place as hallowed grounds, and it really is. And speaking for all of us from the Little Falls Historical Society, I cannot tell you how grateful we are to be able to come to these grounds today and to partner with the Norway Historical Society. They have been first-rate partners, and we are just honored to be able to come here and talk about history and capture an audience. I'm sorry? Yeah, if you look in your program, I will. is our 10th Patriots Day, by the way. But if you look in your program, I'm not talking too long, am I? Doing all right? Okay, I
You're doing
apologize.
great.
I did not mean to talk this long. If you look, page 2, you can see where we've held Patriots Days in the past. Louis told me to do this. Yellow Church Road Cemetery, Herkimer Home, Fort Herkimer Church, Indian Castle Church, Snell's Bush Church, Little Falls Masonic Temple, historic Dutch Reformed Church at historic Four Corners in Herkimer, historic Trinity down in Fairfield, Payne's Hollow Church, and Emmanuel Episcopal Church in Little Falls. And now to that list we can add Norway Rural Cemetery or Four War Cemetery. And I would ask each year that somehow Patriots Day gets recognized here in Norway. We tell the same thing each year. Okay? So, Frank, are you going to go next with prayer, or Bob, are you going to? Frank's first. Introduce Frank